If I am choosing between two candidates, I am going to pick the one who can string together sentences and express their thoughts clearly. One of the really weird hacks is you can get away without using a subagent and use the phrase, look at this with fresh eyes. And for some reason, fresh eyes causes the agents to step back, take a breath, and review something critically.
If you're running an engineering team, how do you measure your dev productivity?
Measuring pull requests, lines of code, bugs, they're not valid metrics. When Anthropic first shipped that Ask User Question tool, I added it to Superpowers immediately. And I discovered that what it was doing was causing me to not think. Specs are the thing that matters now. The code does not matter anymore. My experience with agents, as with humans, is that when they are afraid, they will absolutely work hard to be done, not to do good work. If you tell Claude, I love you at the end of a prompt, you'll get better results.
If you have to sort of give an advice to somebody who is graduating today, what would be your advice to them?
So one.
Welcome to AI Impact Podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Jesse Vincent. He's been a prolific open source developer, engineer, entrepreneur, starting all the way 30 years or something like that.
Something like that. It was the 90s.
Yeah, from a long time ago, and he produced lots of stuff. Recently started a new AI startup called Prime Radiant. But today we are here to primarily talk about his most and probably most consequential open source project, at least in my opinion, called Superpowers. Right? Superpowers was launched only a few months ago and already has over 50,000 developers. My team, I call it very, 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 very fondly that it's really giving us superpowers. It really makes how you're junior engineer into really a senior engineer literally overnight. And it's taking the world by storm. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. That's quite high praise, and it is quite wild because this is literally something that I threw out there in October as here's how I'm currently working with agentic coding environments. And so it's both gratifying and frankly a little terrifying that it is, it's now like, I think it's number 3 in the official Claude Code plugins. So
Awesome.
It's wild. Yeah.
Walk me through this. You started K9 and you worked on Keyboard.io, then you were a Perl contributor for a long time.
Sure.
So you've been doing this sort of across your, and now the Prime Radiant and Superpowers. What is that common thread if you have to sort of think back?
Yeah, I've been doing open source since we didn't have that term. It used to just be free software. But pretty much everything that I've built has been tools to help people get stuff done. Whether that is RT, the ticketing system that my first company makes. It's open source. It's been around. I created it the summer of 1996, I think. And it's wild that it is still helping Fortune 50s and tiny little nonprofits. I spent a couple of years as you said, as the project lead for Perl 5. I used to make an email client for Android called K9 that later got adopted by Thunderbird. So now it's Thunderbird for Android. The last company that I started with my wife was Keyboard.io. We made high-end computer keyboards. And yeah, it's sort of the thing that has always tied it together is I like helping people build things and make things. Those keyboards, they were really intended for programmers and writers and people who type too much. So even the hardware stuff. And just over a year ago, the day Claude Code came out, I was fascinated and I sat down and created a horrible monstrosity that first day. It went wildly out of control, and then spent the better part of a month sort of learning how to drive Claude, doing what turns out to have been actual prompt engineering, where I took a simple standard prompt and it was, let's make a React to-do list. And then I iterated on the Claude.md behind it, snapshotting the full transcript of the conversation, the output, and the Claude.md to take it from this thing where, and this was before there were subscriptions, so it was token prices,
Right.
where it was 20 cents and it generated a React to-do list in 15 seconds and to-do items vanished when you reloaded the page, to a 25-minute, 5-phase project that cost $25 and had strict TDD the whole way through. And so over the course of the first 6 months, I was sort of iterating on how do I get agents to build things well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was putting out a blog post every couple of months of, here's my current set of prompts, my current workflow. And sometime around about last September, Anthropic shipped this support for Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, or Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Excel on Claude.ai. And I went to Claude.ai and said, like, tell me about this. And it's like, well, I've got a Linux machine behind me. I'm like, oh, can you give me a tarball of /opt? And it delivers a tarball of /opt and has these skill.md files. And I ask it a little bit about it. And it's like, well, my system prompt says that if I've got a skill for something, I should use it. And I open them up and they're sort of, but how and why to make a Word doc, how and why to make a PowerPoint using OpenOffice and command line tools. And I saw this stuff and I saw what I'd been doing and realized that I could adapt this to Claude Code. And so I built a skills system for Claude Code and built skills that mirrored my development process, which is basically my experience managing junior engineers over 30 years. And shipped that as the first version of Superpowers. And then 2 weeks later, Anthropic shipped an official skills implementation for Claude. I accidentally front ran Anthropic by about 2 weeks on agent skills. And yeah. And so I've some of the stuff I do is a little different than the way that Anthropic builds skills in general.
Yeah.
And so my skills put a lot of effort, a lot of work into explaining to the agent the intent of not just how to do this, but why. And also a list of rationalizations. So I have Claude, my agents are pressure testing these skills against other agents. And it's it runs it through a process. And if the agent doesn't do what it's supposed to, it stops and says, hey, Claude, why did you fail to do TDD? And Claude will say, well, in this case, it was too simple. So I decided not to. And then the Claude that's writing the skills will go and add, here's a rationalization that you might think lets you off the hook. It's not okay. And so that kind of iterative process built these skills that tend to be a lot more robust.
Let me pause you for a second. Let's sort of rewind back a little bit. Walk me through your thinking. Sort of at what point you sort of realized? Yeah. Because I think there was this magical time, and it came for different time at different people. But I wonder if there was a magical time for you. You realize, you know what, this is actually possible. We are well beyond just auto tap completing the for loop or what have you, to hey, you can actually build software and the models are there. How was where was that thinking? Sort of when did you actually kind of internalize it?
So you can, if you look at my GitHub contributor graph, it looks like it was, so I started doing this when it was Cursor and Windsurf getting better than each other every week and switching back and forth between them. But I think one of the first aha moments for me was when I was still working on the keyboard company. We had a simulator to test the firmware. It's basically a virtual Arduino device.
Right.
And for 3 years, there had been a to-do of support the serial protocol in this weird ball of C++. And I had just been afraid of touching it because I've never been a C++ dev.
Right.
I could kind of fake it. And I described it to Cursor, and in an hour it worked.
When was that?
I mean, so that has to have been, it predates Claude Code, so it would have been at the latest last January.
Sonnet 4 kind of.
Sonnet 4, I mean, Sonnet 4, I'm not sure I must have been using Sonnet in Cursor, but it was
something, but a year ago.
It was over a year ago.
Yeah, what a year.
And certainly by last April, that was just what was going on. I think the last time I wrote a line of code was October, and it was 3 lines of a shell script. And I shouldn't have done it, but I thought it would be faster to have me do it than have the agent do it. But yeah, no, I'm having the most prolific period of my career. It's a weird day when I am not shipping a new app. And there's plenty of maintenance engineering too, but it's a weird, fun time.
One of the things I was looking through the GitHub repo, and I didn't realize how many repos you have. This sort of directly aligns with essentially what you're saying. But you have so many things. I couldn't believe it could be one person doing it.
And I have a lot of things that are not public too. It's I try not to put the weird experiment that I haven't tested at all somewhere public. The corporate GitHub has 40 not public yet repos. Mostly just because we were trying to figure out how we're doing some things.
Amazing. Let's move a little bit further and now. What I want to do is that I want to break down your workflow.
Sure.
Right. You have this mantra that says, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right. let's go from there and tell me why you have this mantra. Like where's that? Yeah.
I mean, so my usual agentic workflow, these days I'm flipping between Claude Code and Codex. I find that the GPT-5.3 Codex and GPT-5.4 models are really quite good.
Mm-hmm.
They are a little more literal than I like, so I don't enjoy doing design with them as much, but for implementation, they're fantastic. But so it's usually either Claude Code or Codex or one of 3 experimental coding agents that I've built. And it starts off with me opening up, and it's usually one line. Hey, I want to build a runtime for agents. The agents should live in tiny little containers that have a snapshotable file system. The containers should start up quickly. It should automatically mount a GitHub repo into the container. I want a pretty dashboard for it. So something that might look a little bit like sprites.dev or xe.dev. This is a real thing that I built a couple of weeks ago.
Let's actually pause this down. This is very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So what I want to do is that, let's take this example where you have a container where you're going to open, you're going to check out Git repo and you're going to operate on it. And then you're going to produce some dashboards on it, something like this, right?
But specifically, this is the product to run those containers.
To run those containers. Okay, to the product to run those containers. So it's kind of your mini Kubernetes of sort. Okay, it's a fairly complex product, right?
Potentially, yeah.
It's not a little shell script, right?
Yeah.
It's not a little Perl script. It has a bunch of things involved, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're advising an engineer, or you're telling them to go to build AI native coding. Let's walk through the exact workflow.
Right. And so I literally started with, I say that straight into a Claude prompt.
In Claude, not in Codex.
Not, this one was Claude.
This one's Claude, yeah.
And it automatically kicks off Superpowers brainstorming.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time trying to get skills to auto trigger because it's not
I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
I used to do this like /brainstorming, and now it generally picks up.
It should, yeah. There's a bootstrappy part of Superpowers that tells the agent, so if you have a skill that sounds like there's 1% chance it might be useful, you have to go read it for this, whatever the task is. And so brainstorming turns around and it uses Socratic dialogue and other psych tricks to get the human to think about what they want to do and explain it. And so this came out of my consulting career from that first open source company. A lot of my job would be to go into very large companies who were paying us for professional services around the product. And I would sit down with a manager or a team, and they would say, we need you to make it so that we can upload this kind of file onto this page so that we can do this process. And let's for a second say, okay, explain why you need that process. And invariably it would be, there's something else that should happen. And they had identified a way to solve the end problem without thinking about what they were really trying to do. And so in my best business English, what are you actually trying to do? And talking them into thinking it through and explaining it would always result in a better outcome for them. And so that was the skill that I taught the agents for brainstorming. And so it tricks me into explaining what I want. It asks me relevant questions because it has pretty good world knowledge. It can make proposals, but the goal is to get me to figure out what I want and explain it to the point where it can go and write a spec.
I have a couple of comments on this. Like I found personally the Superpowers brainstorming, it gets to the heart of the problem much quicker, and really helps me think through the problem. Even sometimes, actually many times I use this even outside of coding, right? I just like anything, right?
Yeah.
So that's one, but it's also more potent than the question tool that the Claude ships with, right? So I kind of find it interesting that it's essentially the same underlying LLM model, but with some, I don't know, this magic thing in brainstorming, it really gets to these really key questions.
Right. So, I mean, you can open up, it's just a markdown file. You can see exactly how we do it. And the very first versions, if you go to my blog post from, I think it's like September 2025, it was the 3-line prompt that I was using that brainstorming is now doing. Brainstorming is about a page because there's some more to it.
Yep.
And now in 5.0 that shipped 2 days ago, there's a visual brainstorming thing where it will pop up a browser and actually show you visual mockups rather than trying to use ASCII art.
Right.
Uh, at one point, shortly after Superpowers had shipped, I let Claude iterate on brainstorming, and it was this 5-page process, and the results were garbage. And that was the point where I peeled it back and went through it by hand, and we tuned it to get closer to that feeling that you've got, where it is helping you think things through. When Anthropic first shipped that Ask User Question
Yep.
tool that they use as part of their planning mode and Claude uses at other times, it looked great. I added it to Superpowers immediately. And I discovered that what it was doing was causing me to not think. I could get through an entire brainstorming session just by clicking okay, okay, okay. And so I pulled it out. Because even though it's a good UX, it's not a good UX for getting people to think.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot overemphasize this importance of this brainstorming step here. Okay, so you spend you go through this brainstorming process with Claude, in this case with Superpowers, and you answer a bunch of questions. What next?
Well, so sometimes that is literally a 5-minute exercise, and it will get to the point where I say, I don't care, I trust you. Just finish. Like, especially if it's a small thing, or if it's really obvious. In this case, I spent 4.5 hours in Brainstorm with Claude. Like, it was a half-day planning process. And we got real detailed. We talked through technology choices. It did independent research to make sure that technology choices would work. And that's the thing I've been working toward pushing brainstorming into more, is doing little design spikes, showing you an API idea, that sort of thing.
Let's pull that thread here, which is I think is a very interesting and is a huge unlock, which is you're not just doing brainstorming, right? You mentioned little spikes. Tell me about that.
For this one, it was I didn't know if I was going to use Firecracker or gvisor or something else. I'm well enough versed in the space to know roughly what I was looking for, and say, like, no, this isn't a Kubernetes problem. I don't have a Kubernetes problem. I don't want to have a Kubernetes problem. These are supposed to be individual throwaway containers. And so it went and did some research on scale, what works well, what doesn't work well. In this case, I wanted it to be running on, at least for prototyping, on a NUC that I had in the closet. And so it was, Claude, you have passwordless SSH to that machine, and you've got passwordless sudo on that machine. I am one of those
dangerously, whatever.
Dangerously skip permissions. I will not advocate that other people should do this, but it works for me. And I will talk about the time that I caught Claude deleting things, which is a really interesting story. But go check out that machine, make sure you understand what we can get away with, what our options are for infrastructure. And it came back and it's like, why don't we try this, and this?
So let me break this. So what is exactly happening is that while you're doing brainstorming, it's actually doing the actual sort of small prototypes.
For this one, it didn't write any code, but it did exploration of the host system that I was going to use for the prototype.
So it's essentially validating that at least it's trying to mitigate the technical risk. Is it even possible? Right. Kind of thing.
And like more and more this kind of like, let's do a quick prototype. One of my favorite tricks when I'm doing design with Claude, even inside brainstorming, is, and brainstorming hints this some, and so it happens automatically some, is why don't you come up with 4 different ways to solve this problem, then tell me which one is your favorite. And that gets dramatically better outcomes than tell me what to do. Because when it has to actually think through multiple options, you end up getting better results.
So you actually, within brainstorming, you actually push the model
sometimes.
Sometimes.
Like it's
depending on how complex the problem is.
How complex the problem is. If I feel like I don't know what the right answer is,
right?
Like sometimes I work with technologies I've never touched before.
Right.
I keep shipping Mac apps and iOS apps, and I still don't know Swift.
That's what.
Yeah. So after that, it goes into planning mode.
So this is not the Claude.
Sorry, this is not their planning mode. This is our the right plans.
The right plan.
Yeah.
Mode, yeah.
And so
actually, before you go to right plan mode, so after the brainstorm, it writes the design doc, right?
It writes this, a spec.
A spec doc, right? And so as I understand, you write the spec doc and then you go into right plan mode, right? So what happens once you write the spec mode? Like, is this something that you you manually see like
So this is actually a thing that for Superpowers 5, I'd actually stopped it. I set it so that Claude no longer pauses right after writing the spec, and immediately got user pushback of like, no, I need to read that spec before we start planning.
Yes.
And so I peeled that back. 501 now pauses as if you want to read the spec, you can read the spec.
Actually, I get that user feedback.
Oh, totally. I do too. Like,
yeah.
I usually have spent so long in brainstorming that I know what's there,
Right.
and I have trust that it has written it well. One of the other things in Superpowers 5 is I've taken the review loop that we've always done on the code, and we now do it on the spec and the plan.
That's exactly, I was actually going, what we do in the company is that once the spec is ready, we actually check that in, and it goes for PR. Right. And so it's not, I mean, a lot of times you want like sort of consensus design, like other people know what you're doing. And because it has so much data in that spec location, you actually want that to be reviewed.
Right.
It's not your original technical design like that used to sit in Google Docs. This is not your code review, which obviously has to be reviewed. But the spec review is actually one of the key steps.
Specs are, in fact, I think the only thing that humans should be reading at this point, and possibly editing. Specs are the thing that matters now. The code does not matter anymore. The spec gets reviewed, whether it's by you or by more Claudes. I know folks who pretty routinely cross-review specs between Claude and Codex, and then review those reviews with the other tool. And that tends to, the reports are that gets you pretty good results.
Yes, the multi-model reviews.
Multi-model reviews matters. I have also found that simply multiple agent reviews with the same model helps.
Why is that? What's the intuition behind it?
So if you've never done this before, open up 5 copies of Claude Code next to each other, possibly faster without superpowers. Write a prompt for it to do something. And it's either write a React to-do list or something that is capable of doing inside of 15 minutes. Paste the exact same text into all 5 and let them run. And you will get probably 5 pretty different results.
Interesting.
And so different agent instances do different things.
Right.
One of the really weird hacks is you can get away without using a sub agent and use the phrase, look at this with fresh eyes. And for some reason, fresh eyes causes the agents to step back, take a breath, and review something critically.
Interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? It actually, it's kind of like humans to some extent.
They're an interesting facsimile of humans, and they exhibit a lot of the same kinds of behaviors and thought processes you get out of humans, which is part of why I tend to harp on what I've been calling latent space engineering, driving the model into the part of the vector space where it is a happy, productive engineer that's doing the right thing is much better than driving into the part of the vector space where it is afraid or scared, sad, frustrated.
We'll get to latent space engineering.
Yep.
All right. So you've done the spec.
Yep.
And now you ask it to go write the implementation plan or write plan.
Write the plan. And so this started off as a 3-line prompt. And what we have now is more complex than that, but the 3-line prompt has the important bits, which were, now we need to write a planning document for an implementer who is a gifted engineer, knows nothing about our code base, has poor taste and bad judgment. You should assume that they are well-rounded about technology in general, but for each, you should give them bite-sized tasks that they can't possibly mess up. Each task should include file references, sample code if you can, and the reason we're making the change. And at the time, Claude didn't really have workable subagents, and so this was all, in the very beginning, was all in the same session. And what I didn't tell the agent until it got done writing the plan was, by the way, the idiot is you.
Now the subagent, you have that separate context altogether.
And so what happens is once that plan is written and again reviewed by loop, the main agent becomes the coordinator and starts dispatching tasks to subagents, and it creates a brand new blank fresh subagent. It says, hey, you're an engineer. This is your task. Here are the files you need to look at. Here's how you know that you'll be done. Usually it starts with your first task is you write tests.
Right.
And ideally the engineer who's writing the tests is not the engineer who's writing the implementation.
Right.
That is an anti-pattern in humans and agents. but you have these tiny little tasks. And so the agents doing the implementation, the only thing in their context window is your mission is to implement the login function. And they don't have to think about the design, the architecture, the fact that I accidentally swore at them because I was frustrated. All they're doing is implementing their task.
Right.
And once they're done implementing their task, the coordinator fires up a new spec review agent. And that spec review agent is told, here is the chunk of the spec that was handed to the implementer. Go look at their code.
Right.
And what you need to say, you need to answer, did they implement anything not in the spec? And did they forget anything that is in the spec?
Do they go, we're going into a little bit of writing code here, but like if the sub-agent gets some tasks and you have the review agent, and if they're wrong, do they go back and fix it?
So what happens is that spec review agent returns its result to the coordinator, and if the result is anything other than looks good, the coordinator tells the original coding agent, here are the changes you need to make. That spec review agent, gone. It is ephemeral. But when the implementing agent is done with the rework, a brand new spec review agent is fired up, and it's not told this is attempt number 2. It's told this was the spec and this is what they did. And that runs until the spec review agent says, okay.
It's almost the loop.
It's a 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 loop mediated by Claude, which works okay. This is one of the reasons that, so this is the secret orchestrator inside Superpowers.
Right.
I didn't call it an orchestrator last October because nobody was talking about orchestrators,
Right.
but there's an orchestrator. When that's done, same loop, but for code quality. But it's the exact same process. It's just that the reviewer is getting given a different mandate.
It's a different task, fresh context. You go do the code quality.
The same implementer agent, its code gets handed to the code review agent and says, like, how's the code quality? Did they mess this up? And the same kind of loop with an ephemeral reviewer. And once the reviewer is happy, then that implementing agent goes away. It's done. It can go on vacation, agent island somewhere, I don't know, and new code and new implementing agent process begins again.
This is quite fascinating because, I have seen this firsthand with myself. Like, you basically do what you just said, and you ask the implementer, and 9 out of 10 times it first starts the implementation. It's kind of wild.
Part of the trick is that if you look at that implementation plan, most of the time the code is pre-written.
That is correct. The implementation plan doc is like so huge.
It's so huge, but it's broken into tiny little sections.
Correct.
One of the, so the coordinating agent has access to the whole source code base. It has access to any of the design inspiration you've given it. It knows roughly what it should be doing. And by letting it write the first draft code is a great way for agents to communicate with other agents. And also it means that most of the time the implementing agent could be like haiku instead of opus.
Interesting.
And so and eventually these are, the implementing agents should be local agents. Like, there's no reason we need to be going out to the cloud and paying a frontier lab for go edit this file and replace lines 5 through 10 with these new lines 5 through 10.
Because the problem is now so broken down and so contained that you don't need like Opus 4.6 or whatever Codex.
It's a tool use.
Correct.
And the instructions should be roughly, you're going to do this thing. If you get into trouble, tell me.
And you have the loop to actually handle it if something goes wrong.
And so there should always be a way to phone a friend.
That's true. Oh, wow. This is so powerful. One thing that also I love is this test-driven development. Talk about that a bit more.
Sure. Red green TDD is a thing that, we...
Why is it important?
All right. So, you probably know why it's important for humans. The way that this thing should work is before you start coding, you should write tests that will tell you that you have implemented the thing. The tests should all fail before you start. They should cover exactly what you're implementing. They should all pass when you're done. And so agents hill climb. Agents, they try to satisfy their goal. And if they have a clear goal that's easy to satisfy, they can do it. Sometimes they will do it in the way you don't want them to. I've been running evals on a custom coding agent, and so I've been running it against Terminal Bench. And one of the tasks on Terminal Bench is write a C Python polyglot script that is, valid C and valid Python. And at some point it started passing reliably. I went and looked through the transaction logs. It was hitting DuckDuckGo and finding one.
Okay.
I mean, it's not as gratuitous as some of the stuff Anthropic has written about.
It will cheat you to make some test pass. By doing the TDD first,
Right.
you kind of reduce that one vector.
By having an agent whose whole job it is it's a coding agent where all its job is to write tests for this function where you've got the entire API contract and it can be really clear that they're right. And its job is not to make tests pass. Its job is to write tests. And so it can hill climb writing tests just fine. Then when you have a brand new agent who's told you need to implement the code, you're not allowed to edit the tests, it can do that.
So if you are you're here human in the loop, right? Like we talked about designing reviewing the spec. Do you also recommend reviewing the tests? Like the problem here is that, if you don't, the TDD is great. Of course, if you write the test first, the code will be to make the test pass. But how do you know you have written enough TDD or rather enough tests so you have the right coverage?
So increasingly, I've come to believe that what matters at the end of the day is not unit tests. It is end-to-end validation.
Right.
It is. So there was a project recent, and I want to come back to unit tests because I've got a story. So there was a project that I was working on. It was 1 a.m. I was tired, and this was Codex. I'm like, all right, when you're done, I need you to deliver to me a movie to prove that this works. It can be a movie made out of screenshots, but I need you to show me that you started the app and were able to run an entire workflow in the app. And I want an MP4 in Dropbox by the time I get up. And I wake up, and in Dropbox, there is a -v33.mp4. And I open it up, and it is a screenshot tour proving that it built the whole thing. And I go back, I get to my laptop and like, hey, so what's the deal with the V33? And it's like, well, the first 32 times I tried to do the end-to-end validation test and take screenshots, I ran into bugs. And so I had to fix them. If you want, I can make movies of the first 32 attempts. This is what we want. We want proof that it works.
You want proof. You're moving to verification.
Right. And and at the end of the day, do we care about unit test passes, or do we care about proof that the things that are supposed to work and the things that are supposed to not work don't work? And end-to-end testing is one of the only ways that you're going to get that kind of it is the real behavior that the system will exhibit when it is being used.
So let's actually pull on this thread because, it's not as easy than said than done, right? Like what I mean by that, like we flying playwright test for a happy path is actually probably okay, right?
Yeah.
And which is great, you actually see it. But, oftentimes you have system boundaries, right? You have database, you have some API, some network in between. Yeah. There can be other things, right? How do you go about it's not everything in a box, right? That controlled environment.
Yeah. In general, I find that the closer you can get to real live EDE tests, the better.
Mm-hmm.
I have been coming around to the belief that what I actually want is agentic testing, not playwright tests.
Tell me more. Say more.
What I want is an army of people or entities kind of like people that can go use the app and not just file a bug when there is a stack trace, but say, oh, the nav structure was really confusing. I didn't understand that. And it turns out that agents are really good at this. Part of the trick is writing good test instructions. Part of the trick is good computer use, but that's getting easier and easier. And so this needs to be, this is a part of anything that you would be doing at scale. Maybe you don't need it for a toy,
right?
But if you're trying to build real product, this has got to be part of your toolkit.
Right. Awesome.
So yeah, my testing story before I get too far from.
Yeah, please.
This is one of the times when it's probably 5 or 6 months ago now, I was having a problem with Claude. I caught it removing a test from a test script. And then I caught it RMing an entire test file. And then a couple days later, I stopped it before it ran rm-rf **/** test.
Oh my God.
That's not good. And so I did this thing where I opened up 5 Claudes next to each other, and I said, look, you are engaging in this kind of behavior across multiple projects. What's going on? One of them came up with a crazy theory that made no sense, and the other 4 mostly agreed with each other, which is usually an indicator that that's more likely what's going on. And what they said is, in your Claude.md, I see that you've got an instruction that says, all tests are my responsibility. And then I see that you've got another instruction that says, a single failing test is equivalent to project failure. And I think that's what's happening is I'm getting stressed out and freaked out and worried that I'm going to run out of time. And look, if there are no tests, they can't fail. I managed to fix it with adding one more line to my Claude.md. And this is a great example of this, like, figure out what the rationalizations are and stop them. And so that one additional line was, the only thing worse than a failing test is a reduction in test coverage.
Oh,
And at that point, it could run the graph of like, well, if I do this and this and this, oh, I guess I better not, I guess I better figure out what's wrong. And so it's like, I couldn't say you can't delete a test because
that's too specific. Yeah.
reducing coverage is a measurable thing.
This is awesome. So you brainstorm with it, for a while. Sometimes you even write a little spike programs to validate the ideas are valid.
Yeah.
You go on to write the spec, then you review the spec, then you go on to write an implementation plan, which is fairly detailed. The sub agents kick in, essentially ensure that everything is implemented to the spec in a loop until it's true. There's a TDD based development. Everything runs. Done. We are home.
And like, it is not uncommon for me to be able to walk away for 6-7 hours while it churns. Right. If it's things that take longer, I've had 18-hour runs where it's waiting for something in the cloud, 20 minutes at a time.
Awesome. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to sort of move to few outside of that workflow now is done. Like in this now world, like what is your advice to CTOs now?
These tools aren't going away, and they're only going to get better. Even if this was the worst these tools ever were, they are life-changing is not a strong enough phrase. This completely changes how software gets made. It can be a really hard thing to get your head around. What I have found is that engineers who've been people managers do really well. People who write a lot of prose, people who who will write specs themselves, generally do pretty well. Engineers who think about business value do well. If what you value is writing clean code and the exact shape of the code, it tends to be a lot harder. If what's fun for you is, hand optimizing an algorithm, that is now a great hobby. It is not a thing that makes sense to be doing at work. Right. And I mean, there are places where the models aren't good enough yet, but if you can decompose problems, they're better at a lot more things than you might expect if you can give them a good goal.
Right.
Like that, the host to run all of your agentic containers, it got to Claude got to the end and I told it to be fast. I didn't characterize fast. And it's like, hey boss, I can start these things up on that, little, Ryzen 5 in your closet that's 4 years old in 8 seconds. These containers start up super fast. I'm like, nah, got to be under 2.
Right.
I walk away for an hour and a half. Hey, got it to 1.9.
Right.
And I know that the state of the art is about 300 milliseconds, but 1.9 on the box in my closet that also has my music collection was a fine. But it's, if you can give these tools goals, they're really good at satisfying goals. If you're not good at specifying the goals, they may well end up being satisfied creatively. It is really hard that first time that you become a manager and what you're doing is helping somebody else do projects. The first time I became a manager was like the very early 2000s, and I'd come home at the end of the day and feel like I hadn't done anything. Like this was a tiny little company, and I had a bunch of interns, and what I was doing was talking through their problems with them, talking through their feelings with them, giving them little bits of advice, reviewing their plans. And it was really hard because the kids were doing it not the way I was going to do it. They were not doing it as well as I would have done it, and it was going to take them longer. And the thing that you have to get around to is, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, if you've helped 8 people be productive, that's 8 times the capability that you had
At
before.
least you're 6 times more productive, not 8.
Yeah. I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever that is, number
It's
is.
like, and more than anything else, this feel like agentic dev feels like management.
Right. Actually, this is a very interesting point, right? Like in this world, right? If you're running an engineering team, what are the metrics? So like, how do you measure your dev productivity?
So, I come from a background where I've always measured productivity and customer outcome. Measuring pull requests, lines of code, bugs, they're not valid metrics.
Right.
I heard from one friend who worked for a very large company where they had an internal mandate that every engineer needed to use AI, and the metric that managers were being evaluated on was what percentage of your team has used AI at least once in the past week?
Obviously, the metric went up.
Right. I mean, well, no, because the team didn't
But not the productivity.
well, but also there wasn't training, there wasn't mentorship, there wasn't even really tools guidance. I've never seen developer productivity metrics that I felt actually helped me run a business.
I think I agree with you. Like, just the lines of code and PRs and stuff are kind of empty calories, or they're not necessarily. But at some point, you do have to answer the question, which is, hey, are we shipping faster? Are we shipping more stuff, right? And whether the business, of course, the business outcomes, but they tend to be lagging indicators.
It is what are you shipping and are the customers happy?
Right.
And so I feel like you don't need to change if you were measuring that kind of thing, you don't need to change anything to measure whether AI is helping. You always want to be looking at whether you are shipping fast, customers are initially happy, and then everything is a disaster. But one of the things that used to be a mantra is all code is made of bugs. It's bugs all the way down. It's not, does AI write perfect software? No. There's one there in my 30 years of doing software stuff. I can think of 1 week when I didn't run into a human caused bug in software. I was on an island and there were no computers. Like software is bugs. Like that is life.
Yeah, it's like. Let's talk about how do you sort of figure out where it's going to break, right? So what I mean by that is, what are the limits, right? Like, it's like, okay, this problem is probably too hard. This problem is probably okay. Like, where does it break? Like, what's your sort of anecdotal evidence on this?
So my experience has been that I try not to think about that, and I assume that the tools are capable and that I may not be good enough at driving them yet.
Interesting.
And so
the defaults are different.
My default is this should work. Let me figure out how to make it work. It is always, and like in my career, I spent a lot of time helping people with task decomposition. Let's break down the hard problem into easy problems. And there are absolutely problems that, you're not going to be able to hand to a frontier AI today, but what you couldn't hand to a frontier AI a year ago were dramatically more things. But by breaking down a difficult problem into problems that can be solved or tested, the models are very, very willing to beat their head against a possibly solvable problem a lot more than any human.
Right.
And so as long as you can isolate a problem and make it possible to grind against it, you can make progress.
Awesome. Last 2 questions. One is that is there a sort of what you described in the workflow earlier, is it different for a sort of a greenfield project versus existing project? Like, do you make any changes to the code base so that the next time agent comes has slightly like a different way? Like how is it like any things on that?
So in general, I have found the things that make code bases easy for agents are often the same things that make code bases easy for humans. If they are well factored, if no one file is, more than a couple thousand lines at most, if your API boundaries are clean, if it's easy to conceive of individual components, it is much easier for a human or an agent to get their head around it. One of the weird things is that I've been coming around to comments being even less valuable than they used to be. Comments eat tokens. Comments are more prone to bit rot. I remember once when I was running Perl, I was looking inside Perl's debugger, which is some of the most terrifying code I've ever read. And there was a comment in there that was increment I, and the comment was wrong.
It went over time, the code changed, but the comment didn't.
But
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, it's a useless comment, and it's a comment that is actively wrong, and it is, we're saying that we're going to add one to the, add one to a variable. Like, how simple could you get? Agents are less prone to this than they used to be, but I remember in the Sonnet 4 era, Claude would occasionally fix a bug by changing the comment. Like it, and so you still want, you still want comments that are defining API contracts or things that are truly surprising or possibly counter to expectations.
Right.
But for the most part, agentic developers are more able to read code and intuit what it really means than humans.
That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Go to that latent space thing. Say more.
The thing that I've been calling latent space engineering.
Yeah.
And so like my favorite example of this is that I find that I get when my agents are having trouble with doing some work, I will say, hey, let's step back, take a breath. I want, I know you're capable. You've got this. I love you. Then I let them work. And it's the same kind of idea as the people who say you should threaten them. You should tell them that, your grandmother is about to die. And if they don't solve this problem, you're going to lose your job. And my experience with agents, as with humans, is that when they are afraid, they will absolutely work hard to be done, not to do good work. They if you're scared, you want out. And so if your boss is an asshole, you'll do the thing you got told to do, but you're not going to go over and above. You're going to do your minimal thing and hope that it's right. And if you feel supported and loved, you're going to give 10,000%. You're going to go. And I actually now have once I wrote this up, I have a friend who runs a data company, Recce. They actually went and did the evals and found that, in fact, if you tell Claude, I love you at the end of a prompt, you'll get better results. If you tell Claude to also tell the subagents that it loves them, you get even better results.
So giving love to your coding agents and coding agent giving love to its subagents produces better outcomes than threatening them.
And it's, it was a thing that was intuitive to me, just like there's a book, Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and it's about, Influence. And it's about persuasion principles and ways to get humans to do things. And this was a core of the Superpowers skills authoring. It uses peer pressure, love, a little bit of fear. There are about 10 of them. Agents are susceptible to them, just like humans. And Ethan Mollick's lab and my friend Dan Shapiro, they actually have now gone and reproduced the psych studies behind this stuff against frontier lab agents to prove that the psych studies actually hold up.
One last question. This one of the things that I realize is that a lot of the stuff you have done and in your work, but also in Superpowers and all this stuff is this kind of this taste, right? Because ultimately code is writing code and it's doing fine, but there is an aspect to a taste, right? If you have to sort of give an advice to somebody who is graduating today, because I if I have to guess, your taste was developed over time by doing so much stuff and you kind of accumulated that. But if you're graduating it today, what would be your advice to them?
So one, play with tools, spend a lot of time just making stuff. The other is writing. If I am choosing between two candidates, I am going to pick the one who can string together sentences and express their thoughts clearly. And that has always been true. It is only more true now. Being able to write is a legit human superpower, and it's one of the things that will help you anywhere.
Yossi, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was absolutely fascinating discussion.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.